It is an environment that we can grow high-quality grapes in. It's a great environment to raise a family, to live in, and it was really those two things that brought us here.
We are huddled together as a single unit competing against the rest of wine, which is non-Virginia. And I really like that camaraderie in our industry.
The whole reason we got into this is so that we could farm, we could be out in the land, and be at one with nature. I know that sounds really kind of 60s, but it is. And we love wine, and we're fascinated. I mean, to me, I'm still fascinated by it. Put a vine in the ground, take care of it for several years, harvest the first fruit, make the wine, put it in a bottle, have a glass. I mean, how many professions can you do that now, where you see this sense of evolution, sense of production? It's fascinating, and people that are into this, it is their life.
The life of Virginia's wine season starts as the warm, humid summer begins its slow fade into a crisp fall. The green, gold, and purple that splash through the orchards change into the brilliant maroons, deep violets, and sunny oranges of fall foliage. The relentless heat dies away as the grapes grow riper and plucking time approaches. Summer storms are less frequent, and therefore less threatening. The violence of a storm can damage grapes. Rain carries with it the threat of disease. Wine growers prefer drought-like conditions to a wet summer, but the weather in Virginia is unpredictable from day to day and year to year. They work hard throughout the season to protect their grapes from the elements. With Labor Day fast approaching, winemakers take stock of their grape quality and the quantity of fruit they'll be able to haul in this harvest. Grape production and winemaking is a fast-growing, nascent industry in Virginia, and winemakers can't afford a bad season. Today they have technology and science on their side to help produce quality wines. Technology and science that weren't there when Virginians first tried making wine from native grapes in 1609, or when Thomas Jefferson tried growing French grapes on the land of his Monticello home. Winemaking began to take hold again in the 1800s, but the industry was destroyed by fierce battles in the Civil War. Prohibition hit hard in the 1920s, preventing the wine industry from reestablishing itself in the state. Winemaking in Virginia didn't recover until farmers were allowed to grow and produce wine with the passage of the Virginia Farm Wineries Act in 1975.
Since the 1970s, more and more people have been growing grapes. Virginia wine industry has really blossomed. At first, it was farmers trying to learn how to grow grapes to allow a different use for their farms, taking some farmland that was cows or pastures or corn and developing into wineries. Over the course of time, more and more wineries figured out that quality means people will come back and buy more wine.
More wine means more opportunities for Virginia vineyards. Since winemaking returned to Virginia, the number of vineyards in the state has grown exponentially. From 6 farm wineries in 1979, Virginia now has over 120 vineyards throughout the state. Some are small, family-owned and operated boutique vineyards producing 2,000 to 3,000 cases of wine a year, and others are much larger, producing up to 10,000 cases. But even the biggest Virginia wineries are much smaller than most of California's commercial vineyards. Many of the largest vineyards in California produce over 30,000 cases a year. Jim Law, Chris Piermond, John Del Mar, and the People family are all Virginia vineyard owners and winemakers. Each of their vineyards has a unique style, and each winemaker has a unique story.
I think I was 12 years old when it started. I'm not sure I was exactly 12, but that's about the time. So that would have been in the kind of the mid-60s. My parents got into wine in the 60s. They had wine tasting parties and that sort of thing. And they were very enthusiastic about it. And we always had wine we had Gallo, Hardy, Burgundy, and Almond and French Colombard. Those were the house wines, if you will. And we'd have wine with dinner. And I wouldn't have wine every night, but I would, at first I would taste the wines and we'd talk about them, and I was mildly interested. And then as I grew older, meaning more of a teenager, I got into it more. And just tasting the wines, our family's into geography, and we studied, the parts of France. At this time, it was almost all French wine, because in the U.S. they really didn't make much wine of interest, except for the jug wines. And then I moved with my family to England when I was 16, 17. And that's when we started drinking a lot more wine and traveling in Europe and visiting wineries and eating great food and understanding that lifestyle. But I still never thought I'd get into wine any more than enjoying it. I ended up studying more in Europe and just drinking wine on a regular basis, cheap wine. I was a student. And I have a degree in political science, and I did what I always wanted to do, and that's join the Peace Corps. And the connection is that I was trained in agriculture in the Peace Corps, and I was an agriculture teacher in the Congo. And I fell in love with fruit crops and coffee and cocoa, and that's when the farming bug hit me. So I loved farming, I loved wine, so I said when I go back I'm going to explore, see what's going on with the wine industry in the U.S.
I like Virginia, its people, its ruralness, its climate changes. The thing that I love the wine industry. I've always been involved in one facet or another, and for me the Virginia wine industry is so young that hard work and common sense, hard work and looking in and thinking about what you're doing has a great deal of opportunity. In the mature grape growing areas of the world, in California or France or places where you have a relatively mature market, you can't get into this industry without a great deal of money. That's something I don't have. My mom being a school teacher, my dad working for the postal system makes it difficult for me to go inherit $1 million so I can have a winery, please, for my Christmas present. I've done it the old-fashioned way.
There's a lot of factors. From my personal standpoint, there's a lot of different factors. I mean, I came here from California, had a little winery in California, decided I wanted out of Silicon Valley, which was, although we were in the hills, we were near the urban environment, and we said, we want to get our kids out of this area, sell the winery, move somewhere else in California, in a more rural area, and a little more family-friendly place. And that didn't work out, and we sort of stumbled on Virginia in a burgeoning wine industry, growing, just finally kind of coming into its own from a quality standpoint. Certainly east of the Rocky Mountains, probably the best place to grow wine grapes in the country. So it has all those factors. It is an environment that we can grow high quality grapes in. It's a great environment to raise a family, to live in, and it was really those two things that brought us here.
The winemakers love wine, from creating it to tasting it. They love working with their hands and getting involved in nature. They work to create a batch of grapes that, when ripe, will be harvested and turned into quality Virginia wine. The harvest is about more than just removing grapes from the vine and getting them to press. Winemakers have to study the weather and understand how change in temperature can affect their grapes. They know what they need to focus on in a day, and they express it to their harvesting crew. Everyone works together to bring the grapes in.
I'm usually up by 4:30. If wines need tasting, I usually go in around 6 in the morning and start tasting wines because that's when it's quiet and I can focus and make decisions. Get our production list together. Usually by that time I know what we're going to pick. I've made that decision already. So make sure when my crews start showing up at 7, I get them out picking or pressing.
Much more than tasting and harvesting grapes goes into the process of winemaking. A winemaker will select the grapes to plant and then patiently grow and nurture them for months at a time. In Virginia, the harvest begins on a different day each year because the seasons are so unpredictable. Each fall, the grapes are picked and then crushed, and finally they begin the process of fermentation. Red wines begin with fermentation together with the skins of the grapes. White wines generally begin by pressing the grapes so that they have minimal contact with the skins. During the first few weeks of fermentation, yeast changes most of the sugars in the grape juice into alcohol. Next, the juice is transferred into barrels to age and eventually be bottled. Many red wines are aged in oak barrels, while a majority of white wines ferment in steel. This second part of the fermentation process can last between a few months and 10 years in a few cases. Most wine sold in Virginia takes between 1 and 3 years from the vine to the bottle. Many factors affect the quality of the wines, but none more than the grapes themselves. Virginia has struggled to build the reputation for quality grapes, especially those that are used to create red wines.
you know, I started in the early 80s in Virginia, and the red wines were, if you were lucky, they were drinkable. They were pretty awful. And they went from awful in the 80s to hit and miss in the 90s to now, you know, it's still a little hit and miss, but there's some really nice stuff going on. And that's all it takes, is to see a couple good examples to know it's possible, and then figure out how it's possible. That's the hard part.
Virginia winemakers have figured out how to create quality red wines, and their customers have taken notice. After all of the labor-intense work over the summer months, spent mostly in the vineyard, winemakers throughout the state are excitedly awaiting the unveiling of their newest vintages. Tourists from all over the region flock to the vineyards each fall to taste the new wines and enjoy the other activities Virginia wineries have to offer. On any given Saturday, you may find live music, tours led by winemakers themselves,
And actually moves it up and down. And it'll press it down. And this will probably take about 4 hours to press out.
and plenty of food to complement the wines. But as successful as Virginia's wineries are at attracting tourists by the truckload each fall, the industry is still struggling to attain a more prominent place on local menus and store shelves.
Of all the wines sold in Virginia, 96% is not Virginia wine, only 4% is Virginia wine. Of the 4% of wine sold in Virginia that's Virginia wine, most of it's sold at the winery itself. People come and visit the wineries, do some agro-tourism activities, learn about how wine's produced, and really enjoy a day out, basically. And if we can do a quality job, not just the hospitality side, but in the winemaking and build a positive memory for people who visit, we can really extend our base of people consuming Virginia wine.
Virginia winemakers are hoping to continue to grow by seeking out more tourists looking for a full wine country experience and turn those tourists into repeat customers through the tasting process.
The first thing you want to do is you want to swirl the wine, and the reason for this is you're looking for the glycerin content. You want to see how well it sticks to the rim of the glass, and you can tell by how well it runs down. The higher the glycerin, the more body it's going to have. You want to put your nose in, and you want to put it deep in so you can get the full aroma. Breathe deeply, get the full aroma. Let me get my own glass. I don't want to drink from your glass. With the white, you want to hold it up to the light, you want to look for clarity. When you hold a red up to the light, you want to look for color. And if you tip it so that you get the arc when you're holding it up and looking at a red, you want to look what they call as an onion skin right around, and you want to look to see the variation in colors. If you start seeing it from a deep red and breaking down to an orange and more of a brick orange on the outside, your wine is a little bit older and it's breaking down, so which means it's probably at about its peak or it's past its peak. Give it a good swirl, look for the glycerin content, put your nose in really deep, breathe, you want to get the full inhale, and when you take your sip, you want to breathe and sip at the same time so you can taste the wine fully, because half of your taste is through your nose. You want to let it sit on your palate, and you want to let it go all the way down through your palate. Traditionally, when you're tasting wine, you're supposed to spit. I don't abide by that, but that's traditional. And the reason for that is mostly because if you're at a tasting and you're drinking a lot of wines, you don't want to become intoxicated.
Virginia wineries are filled with knowledgeable wine enthusiasts who guide tourists through tastings while taking care to describe each variety of grape. When you taste a wine, everything enhances the experience, from smell to color to information about how the grape is grown and processed. Virginia is still a young wine region, but already the state has developed a reputation for growing certain grapes.
It's hard to say what the best grape is for Virginia because it's not a cohesive appellation. And I think we'll understand that more in the next generation. Having said that, and you asked for me personally on my place, I'm looking at the Bordeaux varieties, which is Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Petit Verdot, Cab Franc, and a little bit of Carmenere. And those varieties are doing quite well. I have a lot of work to do in understanding the best place and the best way to grow these grapes. But to me, it's those grapes in a blend, which is what they do in Bordeaux, which would be best.
Pepper seems to be a very common characteristic in Cabernet Franc. Depending on how ripe the fruit is, it'll be a different kind of pepper. If it's very green fruit, it'll be more like a real crisp green pepper. But then with the riper fruit gets, the more black peppery it'll become. In California, for example, you very rarely see a varietal Cab Franc, just because the fruit gets so ripe there that it develops that very spicy black pepper characteristic. So it's very hard to drink on its own, just because it's overpowering like that. So you'll typically only see it in blends out there. But it's actually, it does really well in Virginia. This one, it has the peppery characteristic, but it's not overpowering. It's much more subtle, which I really like personally. But Cab Franc is actually becoming the red grape that Virginia is known for, aside from Norton. Norton is actually the only Native American grape that you can make into a dry wine and have it be really good. Things like Concord and Niagara make really nice sweet wines, but if you try to go dry with them, they definitely lose something. But this, like I said, it's native Virginia.
Unlike the Norton, many Virginia winemakers are not native to the state. Winemakers from all over the globe have migrated to Virginia for the challenges offered by the climate and countryside. But in sharp contrast to the challenges of making wine in Virginia, the industry is uniquely family-oriented. Quite a few of Virginia's growing number of winemakers and winery owners live at their vineyards. In some cases, you can see 3 generations working together to produce Virginia wines.
The nice thing about this business is that we live here on the property. My kids are involved in the business in a lot of different aspects and have from the very beginning. I mean, we planted this vineyard. You know, I could show you pictures of them out on their hands and knees. They were out there planting it right alongside us. So having a business where your family is involved, Dad just doesn't go away and come back 10 hours later. You know, Dad goes to the office, but sort of the kids come, and we spend a lot of time together, and they're really an intricate part of the business and have been a part of what's kind of helped shape the personality of who we are.
The lines between father and teacher are blurred as winemakers work alongside their children, passing on knowledge and imparting a sense of the importance of family. Family members work in the fields, the cellars, and the tasting rooms, sharing their family values and the wines they love.
A lot of my family now works in the business, not full-time, well, sometimes full-time, but I've got my mom and dad. My dad helps still with, he loves to do tractor work, and they help us with doing some special events, like they were just down in Richmond doing an industry pouring and that sort of thing. We taste wine together, but not so much analytically. It's more socially, more just fun. Then my nephew has worked here full time, and he's developed a real passion. He's 25 now, and he's also working in a wine shop in Washington, and while he's pursuing his real career. But he loves wine. He's more into it than anybody else in the family. My daughter helps out usually on the weekends and helping with retail. My sister is now helping out a little bit. So there's a lot of family members involved.
The Virginia wine industry has itself grown together much like an extended family. Winemakers in the state share a unique bond working under difficult conditions year-round. The winemakers have their own individual styles, but they are very aware that to many potential customers they are judged as one. The knowledge that they will thrive or fail as an industry affects every relationship within their community.
What I do like about this industry also in Virginia, it's a very clean industry. We're very supportive of each other. Because only 4% of the wine sold in Virginia is Virginia wines, we tend to huddle together, we share information, we're very open with each other. Very few wineries would not answer any question I threw at them, and there are very few people I would not answer any question back to as far as the economics, where we buy things from, how we work. We share equipment, we share staff, we share knowledge. We are huddled together as a single unit competing against the rest of wine, which is non-Virginia. And I really like that camaraderie in our industry.
Well, I think we all realize that we are judged as Virginia wine. And so that if our neighbors or colleagues are not producing wine up to what we feel should be the standard, it's going to hurt us. So everybody tries to help out as much as possible to make sure that we can produce better and better wine. And I think in a nutshell, that's what it is. And we might disagree on grape variety, or we might disagree on wine style or marketing techniques, but ultimately, when it comes down to it, we want to make sure that what's in the glass is good. And to me, I get really excited when I taste another Virginia wine that I think is a great wine. That makes me very happy as my own wine tasting good, because I know other people are out there doing things and that I can learn from. And I love getting together with those people that are real focused and serious and tasting and comparing notes. It's something I would like to do more. And that's what winter's for.
Winter is not the only time Virginia winemakers seek out collaborative relationships. Many winemakers oversee their own vineyards as well as several other growers who provide grapes for their wines. This relationship between winemaker and grower is perhaps more important than any other. The grapes make the wine, and everyone involved knows that.
I consider myself a wine grower, not a winemaker. And I am not comfortable just receiving grapes from an unknown vineyard and making wine from them. That's a foreign concept to me. So I would do all my own vineyard, except for whenever I find people that are really interested in growing great wine, I can't help myself from working with them. If they've got the commitment to work with me from day one, meaning planting time through until we die or we go on to do something else or whatever. So that's the commitment I need. And the commitment I need is that no matter what happens, the goal is to make great wine. And the wines every year get better and better and better because we start understanding the vineyard side. And if I was just to work for them for a few years, I don't think I could make that great a wine. But every year the potential's there, we all see it, we taste together, we know what's happening. And as far as a business relationship, I compensate them in a way that there's incentive to do quality rather than quantity. Most contracts in grapes are to pay by the ton. So the more production you have, the more pounds or tons per acre you have, the greater amount the money you make, which is exactly what we don't want to make quality. So we pay by the, for the most part, by the acre, which means that I pay them X amount per acre, and then if I say, okay, you're going to drop half your crop in August because I think there's too much, they'll do it and they don't lose any money. And so that's worked out quite well. It's probably better than a family relationship. If it was family, there'd probably be more problems. Yeah, I think you have to have a certain mindset, and has to be a certain reason why you get into this, to make it work the way we've made it work. And we all have to make money because that is what keeps us going in the business. If we don't make money, then we can't do it. But making money is the means to achieve the end, meaning that because we can make money, we can keep focusing on making better and better wine and enjoying life, meaning our working life better. But the end is not to make money. The end is not to see how much money we can make each year. That's not really a goal. So the goal is to make great wine, and that's also why we bottle each vineyard separately and put the name of their vineyard on the bottle, because that means a lot to me and to them.
Each vineyard makes a unique product with its own taste and flavor. This familial aspect of the industry allows wine to be distinguished as a regional product.
We're always going to be a regional industry, it's because most people getting into this don't want to get big for the reasons I mentioned. So they want to stay small, and the goal is not to get big. And where we can make the most money, quite frankly, is selling directly, selling close by. The further you have to sell your wine away, the less profitable it becomes. And if it becomes less profitable, you usually have to increase production because your margins are so small. So there's the economies of scale, which is why you see emerging regions like New Zealand focusing just on Pinot Noir and Sauvignon Blanc, which they do beautifully, but that's what their thing is, and they have to sell their wine in England or Canada or the US. But we're going to stay much more local, I believe. I don't think you'll see great quantities of Virginia wine outside of a 300-mile radius of here.
We are catering to people who are coming to the countryside to wine taste. When people come to the countryside to wine taste, they don't want to go to one winery, they want to go to 2 or 3 or maybe 4 or 5. And it's that having wineries close together that helps bring them out. The other thing is that Virginia is still fighting to be recognized on the national and international stage. And although we've made great headway in that regard, we still have a long ways to go. And so the better the overall quality of wine is in Virginia, the more it helps each one of us. So we're very interested in helping our neighbors and everybody else in the state grow better grapes, make better wine, market themselves better, because it's that old adage of a rising tide floats all boats. And we're still growing and small enough that that's true. If you go to some of the bigger wine districts, say in California, you wouldn't find in Napa Valley that kind of cooperative effort. That's a little more dog eat dog, and you just don't find that kind of attitude there because frankly they don't need it, or at least they don't perceive the need for it. Whereas here we're still young and growing, and giving everybody a helping hand helps us all.
You can't go to Walmart and buy a local region. You have a hard time finding something from America in most places, and it's a tangible good. You don't know where your fruits and vegetables come from. You don't know where your milk comes from most of the time. Where can you go to say, hey, my family's here from California or Colorado, and I want to have a time with them and show them what our region of the country represents. With chain restaurants and national branding, it's very difficult to find something that's regionally expressive. And I think wine is very regionally expressive as well as regionally produced and locally produced, and that's really what we're trying to maintain.
Well, I can speak for Linden. What we're trying to do is simply make better wine, and I know we will continue to make better wine. I hope we never reach a ceiling with that, and I hope I'm never content with the wine I'm producing. Meaning that because we can make money, we can keep focusing on making better and better wine and enjoying life, meaning our working life better. But the end is not to make money. The end is not to see how much money we can make each year. That's not really a goal. So the goal is to make great wine, and that's also why we bottle each vineyard separately and put the name of their vineyard on the bottle, because that means a lot to me and to them.
Each vineyard makes a unique product with its own taste and flavor. This familial aspect of the industry allows wine to be distinguished as a regional product.
We're always going to be a regional industry, it's because most people getting into this don't want to get big for the reasons I mentioned. So they want to stay small, and the goal is not to get big. And where we can make the most money, quite frankly, is selling directly, selling close by. The further you have to sell your wine away, the less profitable it becomes. And if it becomes less profitable, you usually have to increase production because your margins are so small. So there's the economies of scale, which is why you see emerging regions like New Zealand focusing just on Pinot Noir and Sauvignon Blanc, which they do beautifully, but that's what their thing is, and they have to sell their wine in England or Canada or the US. But we're going to stay much more local, I believe. I don't think you'll see great quantities of Virginia wine outside of a 300-mile radius of here.
We are catering to people who are coming to the countryside to wine taste. When people come to the countryside to wine taste, they don't want to go to one winery, they want to go to 2 or 3 or maybe 4 or 5. And it's that having wineries close together that helps bring them out. The other thing is that Virginia is still fighting to be recognized on the national and international stage. And although we've made great headway in that regard, we still have a long ways to go. And so the better the overall quality of wine is in Virginia, the more it helps each one of us. So we're very interested in helping our neighbors and everybody else in the state grow better grapes, make better wine, market themselves better, because it's that old adage of a rising tide floats all boats. And we're still growing and small enough that that's true. If you go to some of the bigger wine districts, say in California, you wouldn't find in Napa Valley that kind of cooperative effort. That's a little more dog eat dog, and you just don't find that kind of attitude there because frankly they don't need it, or at least they don't perceive the need for it. Whereas here we're still young and growing, and giving everybody a helping hand helps us all.
You can't go to Walmart and buy a local region. You have a hard time finding something from America in most places, and it's a tangible good. You don't know where your fruits and vegetables come from. You don't know where your milk comes from most of the time. Where can you go to say, hey, my family's here from California or Colorado, and I want to have a time with them and show them what our region of the country represents. With chain restaurants and national branding, it's very difficult to find something that's regionally expressive. And I think wine is very regionally expressive as well as regionally produced and locally produced, and that's really what we're trying to maintain.
Well, I can speak for Linden. What we're trying to do is simply make better wine, and I know we will continue to make better wine. I hope we never reach a ceiling with that, and I hope I'm never content with the wine I'm producing.